Hey, good day everybody. This is Jeff from St. Mark's. Today we're going to be talking about mixing sound for the praise band, and we're going to be walking through a high-level process or set of guidelines that we have that hopefully will get you there each week with being able to get a really good mix out of the band. Now, in addition to the video that we've got, there's two things that you're going to need. One of them is a paper copy of this checklist. This is just a one-sheeter with bulleted points that walk through the exact process that we're going to talk about in the video today. These are available up in the sound booth if you don't have one. The other thing you will need are access to a set of sound files. So we have files that represent good band mixes and bad mixes, and at various points in this video we'll ask you to stop and go ahead and listen to a clip. You'll need access to those if you don't already have that. If you don't have these things, come and see me or one of the other sound leads and we'll go ahead and get you all set up. So before we get started, there's three main points that I want you to remember and keep in mind as you go through this. They become kind of guiding points. One, your overall goal is to make this sound good, and that's it. It would be great to hear all of the instruments every week on every song. There may be other goals we're trying to achieve. You may get very lost in the details of balancing the guitars with the keyboards and going back and forth. And if you find yourself there, I'd ask you just to take a step back and go back to the basics. Listen to it. Does it sound good? Because frankly, if it sounds good, you're probably done. That is the overriding goal each and every week, and just keep that in mind. Point number two, don't be afraid to ask questions or stop the band or ask them to replay something if you're not sure really how it sounds, you need to hear it again. As a sound guy, you play an equal role to every single member on that band stage in terms of how the band sounds and making them sound good. So you have an important task to perform. Make sure that you're getting your questions answered, and if you need something, make sure that the band knows and can give you what you need to do your job properly. The third thing and final thing that I'll bring out is don't overmix it. So I bring this up especially in terms of changing tempo of the songs. We generally tend to play 5 songs a week. 3 to 4 of those songs will be at a higher tempo. So the mix that you set will probably be fairly consistent and sound good for all of those. Maybe the guitars are at a certain level. But then we come to something like the communion song, and the song is slower, and maybe we want the guitars to be a little lower. So we play them less hard. We play them, hit the strings less, with less energy. There's a temptation to kind of set that and move that back up again. And the problem with that is if you make major adjustments on the slow tempo song, when you go back to the sending song, which is going to be another high tempo one, the guitars will be way too high now because you've moved them up. When you change tempo, don't over control it, and just make your big changes on the fast tempo songs and make small changes on the slow tempo, and it's all going to come out okay. Again, coming back, make it sound good, and if it sounds good each and every week, you got it. With that, let's go ahead and dig in. Thanks. Okay, let's get into our checklist now, and if we take a look at our paper checklist, we're going to see that points 1 and 2 on that checklist really involve kind of getting started and making sure that you got all the right connections and things, and we're going to walk through those really quickly. These are things you're going to want to do at the beginning during the first song. First of all, make sure that it sounds not bad. And what we mean by that is initially you're not trying to get everything mixed down in a minute or less. But sometimes when you come in, you're going to find that one of the channels, it could be a vocal, it could be a guitar or keyboards, is just screechingly loud for some reason. Maybe the person has upped the volume on their guitar. Maybe the singer just has a lot of energy that day and they're just coming out really strong. And the problem with it is it just sounds bad. And because it sounds bad, it's going to distract you from getting a good mix. So the very first thing you want to do is fix the bad stuff. So if that vocal is screeching, just bring it down. It doesn't really matter how much. And again, you're not trying to get it perfect here. You just want it to sound not awful. You're not going to need to do this every week. So some weeks the band is going to start playing and it's actually going to sound pretty good. This is done. But if it doesn't sound good, always fix the bad stuff first, because that's just going to grate away at you and it's going to make it a struggle to get a good mix. The second thing that you need to do every week during that first song is just make sure that everything is actually on, meaning you are actually getting all the signals you should get into the soundboard. So as you watch the singer, as you watch the guitarists and the drummers and everyone else that's playing, you should on each channel on the iPad be able to see these little green lights that are lighting up and down, and that indicates that there is signal coming into the board from that and that the guitar is properly connected to the board. It doesn't mean you have to hear it, and you don't have to hear it at this step, but you do want to make sure that the green lights are lighting up and down, meaning those guitars, those instruments are plugged in and they're getting signal. If you're not, when that song is done, immediately bring that to the attention of the band and let's get that fixed. Maybe it's a bass guitar that's not plugged in properly. Get that fixed, because basically at that point they have nothing coming through the soundboard. So those are your first two steps. Fix the stuff that really sounds awful and make it sound not awful, and make sure that you are getting a signal for every instrument and every vocal mic, etc., that are on the stage that are being used. And with that in mind, now we'll get into our mix. Alright, so now we're really going to start the first step of our actual mix process. And if you refer to our checklist, this is really talking about mixing the low end and make sure that that sounds good. So when we talk about low end, we're talking about the bass guitar and the drums, and you're wanting to make sure that those are there. In praise music and in the kind of music we play, you don't want either the drums or the bass just to completely dominate. In some musical forms, the bass is just huge. For us, it's not, but you want it to be there. You want to follow the bass and hear it. You want to be able to hear the drums, especially in the faster tempo songs. Those are the things that are really going to push the song forward. So you're going to start out by focusing all your attention really on bass and drums and making the mix right for those two instruments and making sure that they're good. It's fairly simple, and start there. You're going to try and ignore everything else as much as you can. Don't mute everything, leave it there. But with respect to the rest of the music, you want to make sure you can hear the low end. Now what I'd like you to do right now is go ahead and stop. We're going to move on to the next section. But before you do that, go ahead and stop the video. And I want you to listen to two clips in particular. One is there is a sound clip labeled Good Mix. I want you to listen to the good mix and hear what it should sound like when it's balanced. And in particular, listen to the bass and the drums and listen to how they sound. Secondly, there is a bad mix, which is basically no bass and drums. One of the most common problems we'll have with bass and drums is that they're just set way too low and you really can't hear them. In this particular mix example that we've got, we just basically muted them, so they're not there at all. But I want you to hear the good example with bass and drums and then the bad example where there are no bass and drums, and give yourself a feel of what that sounds like and what you are looking for with bass and drums on a good mix. So go ahead and do that, and then we will be back with guitars and keyboard. Thanks. Alright, so now that you've got the low end, now that the bass and drums are sounding good, you're wanting to build on top of that foundation. And where we're going to go next is our guitars and our keyboards. This, frankly, is going to be the hardest part of the mixing process. In worst case, we run two guitars and we run a keyboard. The three of them tend to share a frequency space, and what that means is that they will try and step on each other, and it's very easy to get something up so high that that's all you hear. So all you hear is keyboards and the guitars are lost, or all you hear is one of the guitars and the other guitar and the keyboards are lost. So this piece is a little bit tricky. Again, keep in mind, don't get lost here, keep in mind, make it sound good. And if you're getting stuck and it feels like you're spinning your wheels, take a step back. If it sounds great, you got it. I would recommend start with the guitars first, and we're going to go ahead and take the case of two guitars, and that's going to be what's in the sound example we're going to give you. But start with the two guitars. In some cases, I will actually mute the keyboards if I'm finding it's distracting me from the guitars. You want to get the guitars where they kind of balance. Ideally, you'd like to be able to hear them both because they will tend to complement each other and bring in different sounds, and that's really what you're looking for. One of the tricks I use when I mix guitars, because sometimes it can be hard to tell am I really getting them both or not, is I'll get them both set to a level I want, and then I'll mute one of them and see if I can hear it go away, and then I'll put it back and see if I can hear it come back. And then I'll do the same to the other guitar. I'll mute that one. Do I notice that something went away? I'll put it back. Do I notice that something returned to the sound mix? If you really are only hearing one of the guitars, sometimes that will help you kind of pinpoint that out, and then you can bump up the level of the other one or bump the first one down to get more of a balance between the two guitar mixes. Go ahead and do that, get the guitars where you like them, and then go ahead and unmute or start to fold in the keyboard. Again, you're wanting the keyboard to not smash the guitar, so the level's got to be down a bit, but you definitely want to be able to hear it. Again, with these instruments, oftentimes they won't be consistently played through the whole song, so you might not hear the keyboards during a verse, but hear them come in a chorus, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You want the musicians to play the way they want to play and call that good. So that's kind of what you're going to do, and when you got to that point, you should have, again, nice bass and drums, and on top of that now I've got a mix of two guitars where I can kind of hear the two distinct pieces, and I've also got a keyboard on top of that as well. So at this point, again, we'll ask you to go ahead, stop the video, go ahead and listen to the good mix again. And on the good mix, I again want you to focus in on the guitars and the keyboard, and kind of how they sound and how they sound with respect to the other instruments. With these kinds of instruments, the most common problem we'll have with both of these is that the keyboard is either too loud or the guitars are too loud, and again, they drown everything out. So there's going to be two bad mixes I want you to listen to, one where the guitars are too prominent, one where the keys are too prominent. Go ahead and listen to those and see what you think, and again, compare those to the good mix. The one thing I'll tell you with these is the bad mixes are not awful, and they could be somewhat acceptable, but what I hope you'll see is they're not really as good as the fully balanced mix, where you really do hear more in the instruments and a little bit more interest there. So with that in mind, we've got all the instruments taken care of. We're going to come back for vocals and wrap it up in just a minute. Go ahead and listen to those sound clips. We'll be back. Thanks. Okay, and we're back. So we really have two last steps on our checklist. So the last real element of the sound is the vocal. And as I said before, the vocal is really the most important thing. It should be the focal point. It's praise and worship music, and so you want people, as they're hearing it, to be able to focus on those lyrics. So the lyrics should be clear, and that vocal should be really the focal point of the music. Not, again, volume-wise, head and shoulders above everything else. It should still balance in, but you want people to definitely hear that, and it shouldn't get drowned out by other things. So now what you're going to do is go ahead and put that vocal in and set that vocal level to the point where, again, it sounds good. And at that point, you got it. Now the last step on the checklist then is basically to go back and kind of reiterate. So sometimes, you start with drums, bass, and then you go through two guitars and a keyboard and the vocal. And sometimes when you get to the end, you've remixed everything so much that maybe you can't hear the bass as much anymore. So just kind of go back again through the beginning and ask yourselves, hey, do the drums still sound good? Does the bass sound good? Guitar's still great with the vocal, keyboard, vocal sound good. Just go ahead and make those last small adjustments. In general, this last step is just going to be very small tweaks to your settings, but you want to make sure that in going through you didn't kind of mess up one of the earlier settings that you did. So go back and check that. So that is really it. That is the process, and if you follow this process, you should be able to get to a reasonably good mix fairly quickly each week. Now again, before you end, we're going to end the video here, but before you end, please go back, and what I want you to listen to is, again, listen to the good mix again, and I want you to listen to that with the vocal. And then again, with vocals, the other problem area that we commonly have is the vocal level is just way too high. And so I want you to listen to the bad mix where the vocals are too high. And again, be able to kind of, in your own mind, kind of see the difference between the two. The good vocal that's balanced with the instruments, and the bad one that is just head and shoulders above everything else, and frankly annoying because it's a bit screechy. So go ahead and listen to that stuff. And with that in mind, we'll wish you luck, and we will see you on Sunday, and enjoy the mixing process. Thank you for watching.